Hi guys, if this is the first time you're visiting my channel, welcome. This video is going to be just a quick intro to a longer set of videos on the issues that I had with my auto shifter, the lock for the shifter that was preventing the shifter from coming out of park like it's supposed to when it's functioning properly. This is an 05 Corvette convertible. It's a C6 obviously, and the issue was that the dealership was not going to pass the vehicle for its safety inspection in Massachusetts because of the fact that it wouldn't come out of park. Long story, a whole different issue there, but I thought that I would just summarize with what the outcome was, and you can determine whether you want to watch the other videos for more information, for more details on how I investigated the fix that I ended up putting into place or anything else. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit the accessory here. Normally, if you were to foot off the brake pedal, if you try and take it out of gear, it should, in accessory mode, come out of gear here. And the solution that I ended up coming up with was, rather than bypass the shifter lock that's underneath here, I essentially just replicated the momentary switch that's on the front of the shifter, and I put a button that is right up underneath here. You can see this button if you listen. You can hear that click. That click is the shifter, actually the shift button being removed so that you take it out of gear. So that button prevents me from having to deal with the fact that the momentary switch that is supposed to be making contact in front of the shifter can fail. So if you want to get more information on which button I used here, how I did it, how I disassembled things, watch the other videos, but I wanted to kind of summarize my solution, which was run the microswitch wires for the center microswitch up to a momentary button that I ended up mounting right in here, and all the part numbers of the things that I used are in those other videos. So I'll put them in the description here as well so that you can see them, but I've seen a lot of solutions where people actually got into the shifter console and cut or broke off the pawl that is used to keep the shifter in the safety position, secured position. I didn't want to break anything, I didn't want to change anything, but I also didn't want to just replace the micro switch, because if it breaks again, then you could get stranded somewhere again. So this will prevent me from ever getting stranded, because this is essentially becoming the micro switch, and I don't have to worry about trying to replace this one in order to make that one work. And this is a much more robust switch than the one that's in the center console. So I hope that helps. I hope that gives you some ideas, and if you watch the other videos, please give them a thumbs up and comment with how successful this solution is for you. Thanks. I wanted to go through and show some important details. The clips that are on the back of the seat warmer have release clips, first of all. So we will have taken this piece completely apart, and we will have removed the traction control. We'll have taken out the passenger side airbag. Try not to mess anything up here. Passenger side airbag indicator. I just pulled the actual light out of the piece rather than unplugging it, because sometimes the plugs can be a little tricky. So sometimes it's easier just to loosen up these little flanges and have that thing open up, and then take it out completely and just leave the switch attached. There had been some work done previously, because I can see where somebody, a technician or somebody, has probed these wires, and if you can see, there's little pin marks, and that's where a technician would have used a multimeter probe to try and pierce the wire in order to gauge. It's like this. I'm going to be using it today as well, but it's a small, almost like a needle that goes into your multimeter and allows you to gauge the wire without having to actually strip anything off. So I realized that somebody's been here before. No big deal. But I wanted to show some of the disassembly things. Let's see, so I've taken everything apart. So on all of the connectors, all of them, there is some kind of a connection. some kind of a fastener that is holding the plug to the receptacle that it's plugged into. Don't listen to the ones that say that there is nothing. On this particular one, there is a clip that actually snaps down over this little tab right here. And on the other side, on the receptacle side, the receiver side of this, there's a little tab that pops over that, and you have to lift that tab up just a little bit, and then you can pull it out. On the seat warmers, there's this tab that's up on top here. As you can see, that actually like pushes down the little pin. Let's see if we can see this a little better. You can see where this is actually designed to spring, and it pops on over a little knob that's on the receiver side. The cigarette lighter socket has, again, a catch right here. So don't listen to anything that says that in order to remove these pieces, you just tug on the wires. Every one of them has some sort of a release, which is that one. This is the driver's side heater seat warmer. This is the passenger side. This is the cigarette lighter. The hazard lights plugs in like this, and the catch is actually underneath it. So if you're going to be taking this off, which you'll have to, the underneath side will be where that release is to get the thing to come out of the hazard connector. And if I was to swing this around, sorry, again, this is my first video, so bear with me. If you were to look at the connector, you can see that on the bottom there's that little tab, that little thing sticking up in the middle. That's actually what connects to the that plug. So you have the back side. Here's the back side of the panel. You can see up by the cigarette lighter, that's the cigarette lighter that goes in the center console. Then you have your traction control switch that goes there. The back of the two heater buttons, as well as the cigarette lighter, and then the hazard switches up there. So those are all of the things that come loose as far as connectors go. As far as where the screws are, there's two that go in here, and there's two that are on the side over here, underneath where the, let's see, down there, sorry about that. Down here, these two screws come out, and then that side panel, which is this guy, will come off, and the center console shroud will come out. Once you got that done, this snaps up. This is the emergency brake vinyl shroud. So it unclips and kind of snaps outward from the top. The other two aren't really spring clips. They're just held in place more by positioning rather than actually being fastened in place. If you lift the center the shifter shroud up, there's the way that this trim goes around the let's see, where can I find that guy? I moved it, sorry about that. It's over here. So that shroud, this vinyl flange or vinyl cover, snaps in to using these little snap spots right here, and they actually go, if you look inside, you can see those little protrusions on the inside of the indicator, the gear indicator. So it goes there, 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 and then on the outside you can see that there's little bars that run across. Those little bars are what snaps in to these pieces and these pieces. So you can see those on both sides. So those do snap up, but you have to be careful when you're snapping those out so that you are kind of very intentionally pulling them up on those spots so that you're not yanking on the the fabric and pulling the fabric away from that plastic piece that goes underneath it that actually secures in place. This guy, I don't know what we call this, but this one actually has two clips that are here, and this is again going to be positioned normally like this. So this is on the rear side of the vehicle, and this one is on the front side, on the forward side. And those clips, let's see if I can get that to focus a little better. You can see they're clipped into this notch right here, and this notch has a catch on the outsides, and this piece snaps in and then flares out, and it catches it on those two little shelves. And to bring them in, you have to, these are actually pretty hard. So the easiest way that I found was to kind of pry using a very, very small hook tool to pry against the inside edge, and it just takes a little bit of a pop to get it out of there, and then I was able to keep pressure on it being released and then popped the other side off, so that came out too. So once that piece is out, I think that there has been caution about using this. Just be careful when you're removing this piece, but hopefully you can get it pulled out of the way without damaging that piece. And I will say that I did have to take the shifter out of park in order to get the center console removed, because otherwise the shifter is too close and it won't allow you to take it off. So I did have to sit out here for a little bit of time and just kind of deal with the switch, and eventually got it to where I could take that down and take the shroud out. Once you have the shroud out, then you can do the other pieces. But obviously you can't get to this wonderful little designed piece right here, which is the bane of everybody's existence with the C5 shifter problems. So that's the pawl that gets kicked, that gets you hear it kind of kick back when you put your foot on the brake. That is the solenoid there that's in bright yellow. That rod connects the two. That solenoid pushes out. It kicks the pawl out of the way, and then the shifter is able to slide back and go into gear. And if that doesn't release, if that solenoid doesn't work and that pawl doesn't come out, then you got the problem. Some people have just cut this thing off. I'm not a big fan of breaking things, but at the same time, I don't want to put in a new solenoid switch and then, as it turns out, have the same problem again, in a year or two down the road, and I have to go through all this process again. I called it quits last night, and I thought I needed to go out and get a couple of parts. So I went ahead and went out last night, and I got a momentum switch, which is just a temporary connection of a circuit, and I got some shrink tubing that I'm going to use on the wires that I'm going to install, and I got some primary wire. And what I've decided to do with this 18 gauge is bigger than I need, but I couldn't find any 20 or something that was closer to the same gauge that's on this switch. So I'm going to summarize where things are in case you haven't watched or don't want to watch the other video where I did all the troubleshooting. The microswitch that is here is intermittent, and what that microswitch does is it provides a ground to the solenoid. So that ground is only grounded, it only provides a ground when the car is in the state where it needs to actually have a ground to energize that pawl's release mechanism. It doesn't stay energized the entire time the brake or the shifter is in park. It only does it when the car wants to actually grant the ability of being able to be taken out of park. So that would be when you put your foot on the brake, or if you have the ignition in accessory, if you have the ignition in accessory mode. In that situation, that switch is closed, then the car is providing ground on the other side of the switch, and then that solenoid activates, and that solenoid will kick that pawl out of the way, and then you can shift it out of park. Once that is out of park, then that switch becomes it deactivates the solenoid because the shifter is no longer in park. So even when even when your foot's on the brake, when you're driving, you won't be energizing that solenoid. We're going to take the we're going to jump both of these wires, the orange and the blue that's on this momentary switch. I'm going to take both of these wires and I'm going to extend those to the button that I showed you before. And with that extension, what will happen is I'll be able to, when this switch isn't making good contact, I will simply open the center console, push that switch. That will engage the solenoid, because when the car is in the right state, so my security mechanism stays intact, that momentary switch will energize the solenoid. I could take it out of park, let go of the button, and then that solenoid will no longer be energized, and the shifter will still be able to do everything that it needs to while it's not in park. When it goes back into park, then I'll have to do that potentially again, but at least it keeps the security mechanism in place. I won't be breaking anything that's on the car. It keeps security features in place. It keeps the pawl intact. I didn't want to replace the switch because I didn't want to have to do it again in the future, because that switch is really problematic. It's a very particular switch, and so this is what I'm going to do for now. So once I get things kind of wired up and figured out, I will proceed from there. That right there, there's the button. I've drilled it in place. Hopefully you can see that's the button right there. Back side of the panel. There's plenty of clearance in here where this part goes back into the vehicle. So I've got plenty of clearance up underneath here where that'll go. So I figured that's going to be the best place for it. And when the center console, or sorry, when this cigarette lighter section is closed, you won't see it at all. When it's open, it's going to be fairly unobtrusive. But I will wire those two to be parallel to the orange and blue wire that are going into that micro switch. And I'll put everything back together, and then I will show you how it works. This I just unscrewed. There's 5 screws. There's one that's on the bottom, and then there's 2 on each side. They get screwed into place, and then 1 on the bottom. So here's what it looks like from the back side of the panel, with the panel screwed back into place. And then that flips down, and there's the button inside the cigarette lighter socket area. So I'm going to it's got little tabs on it for spade connectors, so I'm going to wire up the microswitch parallel circuit, and I will zip tie it to the cigarette lighter connectors, and then I'll just plug it in and put it back together. So what we're going to do next is actually the blue and orange wire right here, they both come over into here. This space gives me a little bit more room, and I'm just going to essentially grab those wires out of the track, and I'm going to extend the orange and the blue, and run those two up to essentially where my cigarette lighter socket is for my cigarette lighter plug. And I'll just wire tie it up here, and then when I'm putting the thing back together, since it's right next to the plug, I'll just plug those 2 in, and we'll be hopefully good to go. So I will strip these and wrap and solder the connections, and tape it up. Okay, so I thought I would just show how I ended up connecting this, wiring this in. It's a little tough to see now, but inside of here, there's the blue and the orange wire that come up here, and up in this space right in here, I connected my 2 yellow wires to the blue and the orange It doesn't matter which side is which. This isn't, it's not a directional circuit, so it doesn't matter, positive or negative in this case. So I've got that wired to where I'm going to be running out to the switch, and just kind of used shrink wrap over the top of it. I didn't shrink it or anything, I just used it as a protection. And then I've run it up close to where that cigarette lighter socket is. So I will, once I get this closer, I'll clip off the excess wire and put on the 2 spade connectors. Those will get connected to the push switch. That'll get plugged into the cigarette lighter, and everything will be put back together like it was before. Okay guys, there was a small detail that I wanted to show here as I'm putting this thing back together. That little tab fits down into that little socket right there. And then underneath, hopefully I can get this, there's those pins that I showed before in another video. And those pins drop onto slots that are right there. Those 3 notches, that center goes on that post. So there's a bunch of those that go all the way around. You can see them. You can see them on this underneath, and on this side they drop down into that notch where there's that post that runs through the middle of that gap, and it goes all the way up. There's a bunch of them. The other thing, make sure that when you're taking this thing apart originally, that when you lift this piece up, when you lift the entire plastic piece up, you don't need to take the foam off. That's a pain that you're going to have to glue back on. You can get that to come off with removing this post that drops down underneath. Kind of tough to see now, but it goes down into a little notch there. You probably see it in the other videos. And this whole plastic piece will come out, and it will just turn sideways and lift off of the boot and off of that little insert that snaps down over the shift, the gear indicator that you can see with that P right there. So you don't have to remove the boot when you're taking this thing apart, so you don't have to try and glue it back together. And this thing will just snap back onto this piece, and then the boot is elastic around the outside edge, so it will just drop down over this little lip here all the way around, and then our boot will be back on, and then we'll be able to continue. Okay, before we get too much further, I wanted just to make sure that I've got this thing working like it's supposed to. So I've got my boot back installed here, and I just want to make sure that that the switch is going to work as expected. So I'm going to go ahead, and rather than do the start, I'm just going to kick it into accessory mode. And accessory mode would normally have this thing in that solenoid would engage. We would have heard it kick. I'll close the door. So now if we touch this, now we hear it. That's exactly what we want to hear. So that will be the same thing as when I'm touching the momentary switch. And that, you can hear it kicking that solenoid out of place, or kicking that solenoid to remove that safety catch. And if I don't know that I can do it because I don't have 3 hands, unfortunately. But if I twist those wires, we can see that it will come out of gear. If I remove that, that switch is still installed. That switch is still wired. So you can tell right now that that switch has a problem. And I would have been sitting here trying to wait for the thing. And we've all been there. We can't get it to get out of gear. And at some point, it would have released and we would have been going. But now I've essentially got a solution for that. So I will show once the switch is installed and we're all back together. Okay, so I'm in my 05 Corvette C6, and I'm going to put it in accessory mode, and just like everybody else has had a problem with, should be going into that switch, should be able to take it out of park when I'm in accessory mode. The problem is that there is a microswitch that is checking to see if the shifter is in park, and if it is, then that switch provides ground. There's an orange and a blue wire that are on the microswitch, and it provides a ground when the car is allowing the shifter to come out of park. So the solenoid, which is underneath here, pushes forward and it unlocks that little plastic catch that I've showed in the other videos where I dug into this more deeply. And that microswitch goes bad. It's extremely common. Everybody gets stuck. So what I did was I actually installed a momentary switch inside my cigarette lighter area. You can hear that just click. That's just the randomness of that microswitch. So right now it would likely come out of park like it's supposed to, but if we wait here long enough, now it's stuck again. So I can actually, when I'm trying to hold this, hopefully I can do this two-handed. You'll hear it when I push that in, and now I'll never get stuck again with having to deal with the park. But I also haven't cut the plastic security device. I haven't bypassed any of the normal features. What this switch has done is gone to each side of that micro switch and allowed me to essentially connect the switch contacts together by just pushing this button. By pushing that button, I'm essentially closing the same switch that should be closing in here when this thing is in park. But when that switch goes bad, then it stops doing that, and then that creates the situation like we have now where I should be able to take it out of park and I can't. If I hit that button, you'll hear it. I can take it out of park. Sorry about that. I can take it out of park and whenever I need to. But if this is not in accessory mode, if it's in normal mode, then one side of that microswitch wire that provides the ground no longer provides the ground to that switch, which then prevents the solenoid from working. So in that case, nothing happens when I'm hitting that button, because that button is only simulating the microswitch being closed. So it's temporary. It's a momentary button. It's like acting like the switch is closed. It allows the thing to shift. When I have two hands, I can push the button and take it out of gear, or take it out of park, and then be on my merry way. So this was the best spot that I found to be able to do that. There isn't a lot of room to put in the center console, anything in here. All of this stuff would have been very difficult to do. Plus it would have been way more obvious that it was there, in my opinion. Putting it there, if I take away that light, that thing almost disappears in the shadow, and that it'll be up in the shadow even when the sun's shining down. You know, if you've got that thing open and there's light around, it's just going to be about as unobtrusive as I can get. You close it and it totally disappears, but it's always accessible and it always works when it's supposed to. So I hope that'll help somebody out if they want to take the initiative to actually kind of redundantly set up that micro switch to a momentary and connect it again. There's two micro switches up here, and it's the one that has the blue and orange. At least on my 05 Corvette convertible, it has the blue and orange. And you just run a lead off of each one of those up to the switch, and then you let that switch short that connection out, and then the solenoid will get ground and it'll work. So I hope that helps somebody. Good luck.